James awoke with a jolt and sat up in his bed. It was still pitch dark outside. He glanced at the alarm clock, 3:30 a.m. Oh gosh, it will be a sleepy day at work. His wife was sleeping peacefully next to him, so James quietly lay back and pulled the sheets over himself. But he couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about the vivid dream he had experienced. Then he heard a noise downstairs. What was that? A burglar, maybe? He crept out of bed and listened very carefully for any more noises, but heard none. Yet he was sure there was a presence around. Finally, he returned to bed and thought about what he had seen in the dream. The ferocious cat-like female face that had playfully snarled at him, the sharp teeth, the claws, the eyes that glowed with enticing menace. James knew what this meant. All his years of Bible study and prayer had failed to eradicate deep-rooted desires, and perhaps this dream was an indication that something was brewing. James often wondered where these desires came from, what event or events and experiences had triggered these desires. He reflected back on his primary school days. The primary school was a small rural school with only 3 classrooms: the junior class, middle class, and senior class. The headmistress, Mrs. Sloane, was a stern character who strode about in a black flowing gown and taught the senior class. Her strict discipline, along with physical punishment, had earned her quite a reputation. Some mothers refused to send their children to her school. Others sometimes complained to Mrs. Sloane that their children were not to be shaken like rag dolls. Even the first day had been a shocking example of how easy it was to receive physical punishment. Everyone had gathered for morning service. It was the first day of school after the summer holidays. For James, it was the first day of school in his life, and he was taking in the new experience. Everyone was singing a hymn, and during the singing, one of the older boys was making silly faces and grinning. The hymn carried on in the background, something about glory to God in the heavens, and then down out of the heavens came a ruler, swung by the hand of Mrs. Sloane. It hit the lad Philip on the head with a whack. His grinning turned to a wince, and he immediately stopped making silly faces. James concentrated on the hymn book, although he couldn't read all the words. Nevertheless, it seemed wiser to conform. Boys seemed to misbehave more than the girls. Therefore, it was mostly boys who had their legs slapped or were given a thorough shaking by Mrs. Sloane. While still in the junior class, there was an incident that perhaps indicated James already had the seeds of desires. Junior class was taught by a young teacher named Miss Carter. She was a lot younger than Mrs. Sloane and had a different approach. James had never seen her shake or spank anyone. Then again, the junior class held the 4 to 6-year-olds, and they were mostly as good as gold. Miss Carter arranged a lot of creative lessons that involved painting, wax crayons, and sometimes games such as playing shopkeeper and counting pretend money. One of her projects was that the pupils had to create a scrapbook. They were divided into teams of 2, and each team was given a large book of blank pages into which they had to stick magazine and newspaper cutouts on a theme. Each team had to pick a topic, such as dogs or cats or cars, and then look through a whole pile of newspapers and magazines to find suitable images on that theme. After each team had decided on a topic, they had to tell the class what their chosen theme was. James got together with his assigned partner, a lad named John. They started leafing through the magazines to decide a theme. James' eyes noticed an image, an advert for a Playtex girdle or similar. The advert showed a young woman smiling proudly while wearing some white underwear. He had not seen any images like that while reading his comics at home, and it grabbed his attention. He stared at the lady in the advert for a while, and then joked with John that they could collect similar images as their theme. John laughed. They both knew doing that would end in trouble, but somehow that is what they ended up doing. Obviously, they didn't announce their theme to the class. When Miss Carter asked what they were collecting, James replied that they were still deciding. In reality, they had already collected a significant number of lingerie images and pasted them into their scrapbook. It was all great fun. Even other teams slipped them images they had found on the same theme. Then, of course, one day James was called over by Miss Carter and told to bring the scrapbook with him. John had decided to escape punishment by confessing all and probably blamed James for everything. Actually, Miss Carter was very reasonable about it. She told James to open the scrapbook and said, "It's not really very nice, is it?" The strange thing is, she then proceeded to turn the pages so that both of them gazed together at ladies wearing black bras or white lingerie or wearing girdles and stockings. Eventually, she closed the scrapbook, slid it toward James, and said, "Please choose some other topic, and you had better be quick to catch up with all the others." James replied that he would. Yet as he said that, he detected that behind her facade of following the rules, she had been amused by his antics. For a moment, he caught a glint of mirth in her eyes, a hint that teacher Miss Carter was not always prim and proper.